So in this section, we're going to be looking at how we can find a fraction or a percentage of a quantity. Now, I've kind of hinted at this for quite some time through this playlist, and you probably saw it in practice in the last section on ratio, but I'm going to formalise it now so you're clear on how this works. So let's say we want to work out what 1/5 of 20 is. Now, first of all, a little bit of terminology here. We refer to this as a unit fraction because it's 1 over. So that if the numerator is 1, we refer to it as a unit fraction. So 1/5 of 20, what does that mean? Well, essentially, that is exactly the same thing as saying 20 divided by 5. Because if you're finding 1/5 of 20, you're trying to split up the 20 into 5 equal parts, and you want one of them. Okay? That's what that statement is saying. So when we think about 1/5 of 20, it's the same thing as writing 1/5 times 20. So when you're multiplying a fraction by a number, okay, that's exactly what this is saying. 1/5 of 20 is the same thing as 1/5 times 20, which is the same thing as doing 20 divided by 5. Now, you might be going, well, why is that the same as that? Well, if you remember back to our fractions, when we were just looking at multiplying, dividing fractions, if you remember, in order to divide by a fraction, so 5 is the same thing as 5 over 1, dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So this is the same as 20 times the reciprocal of 5 over 1, which is 1/5. And as I just said, 1/5 of 20 is the same thing as 1/5 times 20. And it doesn't matter which way round we multiply numbers, so this is the same as this. Okay, so all three of these things mean the same thing. We're trying to work out exactly the same thing. So, 20 divided by 5. Well, 5 goes into 20 4 times. So 1/5 of 20 must be 4. Now, when we advance to non-unit fractions, so 2/3 for example, it's best to think of this in 2 stages. Now, the way around that I always think about this is I think about the division first and then the multiplication. So what I mean by that is when I'm doing 2/3 of 60, I'm thinking about what is 60 divided by 3 first. Okay, so I'm thinking about it like this. I'm going, well, what is 60 divided by 3? And because I want 2/3, I don't want 1/3, that would just work out 1/3. I want 2/3. So then I'm going to multiply my answer by 2. So that is the order of operations that I'm really considering here when I do 2/3 of 60. So I'm going to do the 60 divided by 3 first and then multiply by 2. Now you might be saying, well actually, could you do it the other way around? Could you do 2 times 60 and then divide it by 3? And yes, that would work also. But that's just not how my brain works on these problems, okay? So I always think about doing the denominator, dividing by the denominator first, and then multiplying by the numerator, okay? So I want to work out what 1/3 is first by dividing by 3. Now 60 divided by 3 is 20. So this is the same thing as 2 lots of 20, which of course is 40. So when you've got a fraction of a quantity, you want to divide by the denominator first and then multiply by the numerator. Okay, so I did the same thing here. I did 20 divided by 5 first, and then I multiplied the answer by 1, okay, which 4 times 1 is just 4. So you can think of it as that kind of routine, but it's making sure you're seeing this as a division followed by a multiplication. And if you get into that habit, then you should have no problem with working out fractions of quantities.